Good morning. This is Barry Bryson, and I'm thanking you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. Today we're in Psalm 131. This song does not have a historical reference in the superscription other than it is a song of ascents, a song of ascending. It's by David. That's all we know from the superscription. The songs of ascent, which begin back with Song 121 or Psalm 120, excuse me, and go ahead to I always forget which psalm they end on, and they go ahead to Song 134. Psalm 134 are a collection inside the hymn book of the songs that the people would sing on their way to Passover to prepare themselves mentally and spiritually to worship God. And the reason it's called a song of ascending is because Jerusalem is set on a hill, and whether you're coming from the north, south, east, or west, you're going up to Jerusalem. And so it's a song of ascent. It's also a song of ascent spiritually, in that there's a process, a progress that the singer makes on the road. And maybe later on we'll look at the songs of ascent as a group. But anyway, this was one of the later ones, and it's just a gift to the human race. I mean, it just is a jewel, it's a gem. I love this song so much. I don't know that I love it more than Psalm 23, but equally as much as Psalm 23, and the two of them together, if all we had of David were those two songs, he would be one of the great literary figures who ever lived. But since we have more, I believe him to be the greatest literary figure that we have ever had on earth. We haven't talked much about songs and about poetry, about language, the way a song like this, reading the lines, engages your whole brain, uses both sides of your brain simultaneously, but it does, and it touches your head and your heart simultaneously as well. Communicates, the words communicate more than they can individually. Together they communicate much more deeply and engage our brain much more thoroughly than just words on a page. And of course, this is the living Word of God, Hebrews 4:12, and so we're talking about something on a completely different level, a higher level than reading a great poem by Emily Dickinson or Robert Frost or someone, or Yeats maybe. But let's just read this psalm. It's only 3 verses, and I'm certain David writes this as an old man. Psalm 63, which I'm sure was written when David was an old man, sounds like this. Psalm 23 sounds like this. This is not a young man writing a symphony. This is an old man writing a short, very deep, very wise song. David writes, O Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me, but I have calmed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with its mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. This psalm to me is almost like a really good haiku, in that you have so few syllables, but in the right combination, they create a world, a universe in which David tells us his spiritual state and his spiritual relationship with God. This is a man who's humbled himself, James 4:10. I have calmed and quieted my soul. This is not something a young man can say. This is something a man who's gone through all the things David has gone through can say about himself. I've calmed and quieted my soul. And then there is that image, which I'm sure in the music was a refrain, because he says it like a weaned child, like a weaned child. And it's that image, that one phrase that's so powerful, that speaks as much as chapters speak, like a weaned child. still a child, still dependent, but one that is weaned, not one that is hungry, not one that is looking forward, asking more, 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 more. I'm a child who is satisfied. I'm a satisfied child. And that David, this greatest of warriors on earth in the history of humanity, always describes himself as a chick under his mother hen's wing, as a lamb being led by his shepherd, as a baby being cared for by his parent, a child on his mother's lap. I know that when we studied the wives of David, we had a hard time getting over how badly he treated his wives. But God in Acts 13 described him as the man after his own heart. That was true in Acts 13 as it was when he was a little boy and he was chosen to be king. God made it clear to him that he had committed sins worthy of death, and God made him live with the consequences of his own sin. But God forgave him. And that in itself is an enormous lesson that all of us have to learn as well. At the end of the day, the goal is not to be the king on his throne, like Louis XIV, shining like the sun. Is to be the weaned child on the knee of his parent, on the knee of God. And that's what David understands brings us to in Psalm 131. Thank you for joining me. Go back to 2 Samuel and look at the last words of David's life, the last songs he composed. But thank you for joining me for this part of our study throughout the book of Psalms.